Welcome back to another edition of New York Got Game. The New York Knicks, they're winning, but they're not exactly silencing the doubters right now. Though they've won 12 out of their last 15 games, but at the same time, there's still a lot of real questions about this team's true championship DNA. They've had two blowout losses in that stretch to the Detroit Pistons, which a lot of people want to talk about, and it's passed some serious concerns about their physicality, about their mental toughness. But at the same time, there's still real questions around this team, as I said. And we've also seen games where Jalen Brunson has had to save the day late for this team. So I think the big question right now around this Knicks team is pretty simple. Are the Knicks a true title contender, or are there still warning signs that could hold them back? So this week, got a good guest to join me to talk about the Knicks. And he joined me last year around the same time, and we had a lot of questions about the Knicks. It's my guy, JD from Knicks Fan TV. Joining me now. JD, what's going on, bro? How you doing?
Dexter, here we are again. Same time, new season, and a lot of similar questions for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, and for people who don't remember, I think last season, I can't remember if it was after I don't know, it was one of the Boston blowouts or one of the Cleveland blowouts. I had JD on with me, and we had a long, deep dive discussion into what was wrong with the Knicks. And I just think it's an interesting time, JD, with this team. And you and I were talking a little bit about this before we started recording because they've won 12 out of the last 15 games, right? So let's start here. When you watch this team right now, do you see a true title contender, or do you see a team right now that's got some real flaws? What do you see in this Knicks team?
That's a very tough question to answer because it seems to be week to week, day to day with this team. They
Mhm.
go through stretches where you see, a dominant, high ceiling team. You know, when we talk about the potential of this roster, the differences between the Mike Brown Knicks and the Tom Thibodeau Knicks, a lot of people like to say that the ceiling is higher with this team. Well, they've shown that in stretches throughout this season where you see how they can, be very explosive offensively and even defensively. You've seen stretches where they can play, good enough defense to be considered a title contender. So I would say in the end, I think they are because the East is although the East to me is very competitive. I think it's building up to be a little bit better than what people are saying. Cavs with the Harden trade, the Pistons, Celtics. Let's see if Tatum comes back. The Knicks themselves. That's four teams right there. That's enough to make a conference, top heavy. They have enough, in my opinion, to make it to the NBA Finals. And at that point, Dexter, once you are a NBA Finals contender, you're a title contender, right? The Pacers made it to the finals and they went to game seven. And who knows if Halliburton's healthy, what ends up happening in that series. So, because of the structure of the Eastern Conference, where in the end, even through their ups and downs, once the playoffs start, they're going to be a uh, contender, serious contender to represent the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals. That alone, to me, yes, they are a title contender.
All right, so you still have them as title contender. I would tend to agree with you on that. But when you look at this recent winning, and we just talked about the 12 out of 15 that they've won coming off the win in Chicago on Sunday night, do you think that winning has maybe masked some of the issues that we've seen, particularly the inconsistency from this team? As you said, it's kind of week to week, day to day, and that kind of speaks to the inconsistency. And also, just like the way some of these games have unfolded, right? Particularly the Detroit games, which we'll get into in a second. But do you think the winnings probably masked some of that? Because it is weird. We're talking about a team that's won 12 out of 15 games, but the vibes around the fan base seems like they've lost 12 out of 15. It doesn't feel like 12 out of 15. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it's pretty much what happens is, Dexter, when you have a roster that is pretty much together. They've made some additions towards the end of the bench factor with the Jose Alvarado, the Jeremy Sohans, even Mo Diarra being added as a rookie draft pick. However, the core of this roster is pretty much the same between the starting five, right? And what happens also is when you enter a new season where you just were, you know, a contender to be in the NBA Finals last season, people jump automatically to the final result. And so even when you win 12 out of 15, the Pistons game is the highlight of that 12 out of 15, right?
Mm.
Because they are the number one seed in the East. And also, quietly, it is a budding rivalry here between both teams because it seems like they don't like each other. You have a head coach that is very much motivated to beat the New York Knicks and get some revenge. So I think that affects kind of like what you mentioned, the vibes and the feeling is you win 12 out of 15, but you let a team that you believe is going to be this year's contender, this year's threat for you to make to the NBA Finals, you let them dominate you in that fashion. However, in their wins, I do think that they they mask a lot of their some flaws, but it's only going to show up in the playoffs depending on the matchup. So if they
Mm.
play the Pistons, it'll be a situation. When if they play the Cavs, it'll be something else, right? It'll be advantage Knicks because of the Mobley Allen versus the Mitchell Robinson. We've seen how that's played out. So yes, this team does have flaws. Winning mask issues. That's why you have a guy like Jalen Brunson. You have superstars because that's what they do. But in the end, will if the question is, will those issues, flare up? It just depends on who you play and how they counter that matchup.
Matchups are so important, and I feel like we'll get into that a little bit later too, because who they play is going to matter. And this, I'll say this: I'm not, and I know you weren't saying this either. I'm not saying that the Knicks haven't had good wins in here. We saw them have fantastic defense against Boston. We saw a good win against, I know it's no Joel Embiid, but a good win against the Sixers before the break. They've taken care of business. There's been some good wins in this stretch. So I don't want to take anything away from them there, especially we saw a terrible stretch in January where they went 2-9. So we like that. But let's talk about the Pistons. We cannot
Mm.
have this conversation without talking about the Pistons. In this 12, 15 game stretch and the 12 wins, there's two blowout losses to the Pistons that really stand out. And I think it stands out for most of the fan base. What do you think those games and the way the Knicks lost, particularly the last one, what do you think those games revealed about this Knicks team?
Well, what it reveals about this Knicks team is that they have a opponent in the conference that is just flat out not at all intimidated or afraid by them.
Mm.
They're not afraid of the Knicks. Going back now here in terms of the flaws and exposing issues, I think one of the things that the Knicks have been trying to build this year has been an identity. And when you talk about the vibes and a little bit of the disconnect between the inconsistencies and the frustrations between the fan base and the players and everyone involved with the up and down and the roller coaster, where you kind of felt like, man, the Knicks should be the number one seed. And why even when they're winning, it just doesn't feel like they're that clear cut favor. Like why are they not the favorites? Like where it just seems, it feels, it looks that way. Well, the Pistons are exposing, the physicality factor when it comes to, making the Knicks feel uncomfortable, when it comes to, exposing something that the Knicks have been trying to find, and it's an identity. And we've seen it in spurts. I think you starting to they're starting to build it up now with the Alvarado and Sohan acquisitions. I
Mm.
think you're starting to see some of that energy spoil over into the rest of the team, where the team is being, they're picking it up defensively, and so you hope that within the next quarter end of the season, that materializes a little bit better, and then they have a better identity, they have a better chemistry as a team, and then when that's why I said it's going to be important when they see them again, we'll see if this is a factor. But right now, what the Detroit Pistons have shown you is that they are not at all intimidated by Madison Square Garden.
Nope.
They have now an immense confidence, and the only way the Knicks are going to shut that down is doing what they did last year, where they were 1-3 last year against the Pistons and beat them in the playoffs. Now they're 0-3, and they're going to have to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's gonna take that. And I wondered, we were doing the watch party last week, and when I had the homie Tarika Foster Brasby, she was in there, Pistons fan, came in there with us. Yeah, we had the ops in the building, and she was asking me a little bit like, "Hey, do you think the Pistons are in the Knicks' head?" And I'm like, "I think a little bit. It feels like that a little bit in the way that things have played out between them." But you're right. The only way to prove it is what they are going to do in the playoffs. But this kind of goes to my next point, JD, because yeah, I was having lunch with my boy before the Rockets game the other day. Shout out to my friend Anthony, and we're talking about this team. We were talking about the physicality, which you just mentioned. We were talking about mental toughness. So, do you believe that this team has enough edge and mental toughness to win a grinded out playoff series? Because that's the basketball the Pistons play against a team that plays with the physicality like the Detroit Pistons do. Do you think they have that edge, enough of an edge or mental toughness right now to get that done?
I think they will once they see them in the playoffs. I think they'll
Mm,
have enough because, again, you'll see the Jose Alvarado factor. I mean, look how that factor came into play when he came in, his first couple games of the Knicks. And how about the Houston Rockets game where he was a big factor late, him yelling at the crowd, getting the crowd engaged. Even Jeremy Shohan, getting into it with Cade Cunningham for a few possessions. That still, although Cade had that one possession where he was successful, but you still show the opponent that you're not intimidated, that you're here to play physical, and you welcome that. So I think the new additions will give enough energy to the team. And then when your captain is Jalen Brunson in the playoffs, Jalen Brunson is he welcomes physicality. He does not shy away from it. And so I think they will have enough to respond to that. I don't think in the playoffs that's going to be the defining factor, actually,
mm,
Dexter, against the Pistons,
mm,
is the physicality. I think it's just going to be, will they have enough from a personnel standpoint of shot creation to counter the ball pressure and physicality that the Pistons are going to give the Knicks? Because that, when you talk about my concern, that's my concern, is they look more physical, but it's also more the fact that when you look at the Pistons, Karis LeVert can create a shot with 3 or 4 seconds left in the shot clock. You have Jenkins. You have a couple of guards over there, plus Cade Cunningham. So, yeah, those are like role players that go to another team. They're not going to be starters or anything, but they have one ingredient that we don't have is if the shot clock comes down to the last 5 seconds, they can create a shot. They can create a shot. We don't really have that after Jalen Brunson against the Pistons personnel where they're ball pressuring us. Mikal, OG are sideline to sideline players, right? And those are
mhm.
your wings, and they need to be a factor against the Pistons. So my whole thing is it's going to be interesting to see, other than Jalen Brunson, who else is going to put pressure on Jalen Duren, on Isaiah Stewart at the rim, and against their pesky perimeter defenders. Who is going to do that? And if we don't have that, then ball movement will have to be the number one factor in order to beat the Detroit Pistons. So to me, it's wrong roster construction where the Pistons seem to be a bad matchup. Whereas you might even feel more comfortable seeing the Celtics again, even if Jason Tatum comes back, just because they like to shoot threes and we can play with that style of basketball. We've proven it already. You want to maybe play the Cavaliers, even though on paper, with Harden and Mobley and Mitchell, you may think that's a more talented team on paper than the Detroit Pistons. As you can see, Dexter, the playoffs is all about matchups and
Ma-
personnel.
Yes, matchup styles make fights. Yeah, it's a great point about the secondary ball creation. And it's not, Detroit doesn't have a lot of guys that do it in an elite way. And you're right. But Dennis Jenkins has been great for them. Karis LeVert can do that. Tobias Harris, in a pinch, if he shows up, can do that for them.
He can still get to a spot.
Right. He can still get to his spots and get a shot. I hear you say that, and I'm like, the answer to the question that you brought up is like, that should be Mikal Bridges. Keyword is should. It has not been, right? You would think he would be that guy to get that done, but that's not. We'll get into some other personnel stuff here in a second. Before I get to it, let's talk about Cat because and look, I want to be very clear in saying this. His last two games, he's been solid. 28 points against Chicago, 25 against the Rockets. I thought he played really good against the Rockets, actually. And the Knicks have been trying to get him the ball more in the post. The Rockets game, I was like, man, I hadn't seen him post up that much all year. It was really impressive with how he played. When he's at his best, JD, he's looked dominant. But we've seen that in small spurts, and then it'll go away, right? We don't know when that's coming back. But I guess the question for me is, with the way Cats played this season, career low shooting at the rim, career low shooting from three, though at least the lowest since his rookie season. Do you trust him right now as a foundational piece for a championship team? If this Knicks team, as you said, are contenders, do you trust him right now to be that foundational piece, that second best player on this Knicks team? Where are you with Cat?
Pretty direct. Do I trust him? No, I don't trust him.
Do not trust
Uh,
him.
I do not trust him.
Okay.
But do I believe he can do it? Absolutely. And that right there, that answer has been the enigma of Karl-Anthony Towns for 11 seasons is
Yeah. Yes.
everyone believes he
Yes.
can do it. Everyone thinks he will do it. Everyone knows he has the talent to do it. But does he do it? Yes. Up, down. Like it's a up and down situation where even when you're trying to present and put him in the right environments, it's still going to come down all up to him. And it's funny because I think we have a more talented version of Julius Randle. I think it's similar issues. You just got a 7 foot more talented guy, but it's still similar challenges, just in a different player, right? It would
Mm.
be the same thing with Julius Randle. I would answer the same thing for the very same reasons. Two ultra talented players, but it's all about the mental part of the game. It's all about the mental makeup. It's all about the approach. It's all about the physicality and the intensity and the consistency in that approach. And that's been the story with Karl-Anthony Towns. And I actually think, Dexter, it might even be more challenging for him to do it offensively under this system and this head coach, because it's just been obvious that Karl-Anthony Towns has been presented a role that the coaching staff believes that if this is the role that you execute and you execute this role to a T, we
Hmm.
will actually have a higher chance to win the championship. And he's struggled with fitting into that role because you see it some nights he'll give you 20 rebounds and 11 points, and then the post game questions is about how come he only had 11 points. So when you're a player that's used to having a specific output and being a focal point of an offense, and you're no longer pretty much that, and you have a more of a different role, it challenges your mental makeup. It
Hmm.
really puts you to the test of, are you gonna buy in? Are you gonna believe that this role that the staff believes it should be your role to form the puzzle is the right fit for you? Because at the end of the day, this is not the Miami Heat. This is not a Miami Heat. You have Jalen Brunson, to me, is a superstar, and then you have a whole bunch of very good players. So the roster of this team, you need everyone to buy in. One person doesn't buy in, is going to throw everything off.
I
And
agree.
Karl-Anthony Town, to me, is the most important Nick to get us to the NBA Finals, because he's our second best player. He might be our most talented player in terms of pure talent and skill set, but he is the ingredient that is gonna take pressure off Jalen Brunson. He is the ingredient you're gonna need against a potential Detroit Pistons matchup. So, do I trust him? I don't. But can I, I'm just hoping that when the time comes, I'm hoping you get enough games in a 7 game series. Can I get 5 out of 7 where he's very good? I think if he can
Ooh.
give you that,
Oh
if he
man,
can
Knicks
give
fans
you,
was signed for that 5 out of 7. They'd
yeah,
sign
if
for
he can
that.
give you
Right
five out
now.
of seven, if a series goes 6 and he gave you 4 good games, I think the Knicks will be in good shape.
I think the Knicks was signed for that. I thought you made a lot of good points there. I will say, I think a lot of it comes, and I think you'd agree with me on this. A lot of this comes down to the player, and I mean this in Karl-Anthony Towns. I'm not here. I know you don't want to bash your Dominican brother. I understand all that. I I think you're right about the point you made about how the coaching staff, they obviously want to put him in the best position to succeed and where they think the Knicks can win the championship. I think one of the things that Coach Brown has been concerned about with him is how do we get him in a situation where we can minimize the fouls, right? The offense, he
Right.
leads the league in offensive fouls, right? How do we minimize that? And those are momentum killers and the turnovers that you'll see with Cat. How can we cut that down? And I think there's a balance. One thing I'll say with Coach Brown that I think we've seen these years, he's been very malleable. He seems to listen to the players. He's tweaked the defense already this season, and we've seen how that's worked. Now I think you're seeing him trying to give a little bit of balance of what he wants with Cat in the high post and looking to be a sort of a facilitator from there and also giving him some post touches. The thing with Cat is it's cool to give him the post touches, but you got to be under control. Now, listen, I'm also not saying Cat gets fouled a lot. There's a lot of calls he doesn't get and has a right to be frustrated. But sometimes he's also out of control. And you'll see the hooking, and I think those things really hurt the team. So it's like he's got to figure that out. And you made the point, JD. 11 seasons we've been watching this. All the NBA
Okay.
fans we've seen this for 11 seasons. You know what I mean?
Can I make a quick
Yes.
point about the fouls? I've been wanting to say this all
Yes.
season because I haven't been on as much, so I haven't had the opportunity to say and that's the frustration thing with Karl-Anthony Towns is yes, he does get fouled a lot,
Hmm.
but I think the reason he doesn't get the whistle that we think he should get, it's him. He's
I
he's the
agree.
problem
I agree.
because because what happens is he argues every single call, everything. He argues turnovers that were his fault, and he argues it to the ref. And the thing is, I don't think he has credibility with the referees. He doesn't
Hmm.
have any. He doesn't have
Hmm.
respect of the referees. You know why? Referees get graded. They see the film. They see the missed calls. You think when a referee goes out and he goes and he sees the film and he sees that Cat just argued this and that and that, and they weren't even close to being what he thought it was. They weren't even close to being a foul. You What happens is all these refs, they program themselves and they give you a reputation. Like Draymond Green, Ron Artest. We've seen it so many times where certain players develop a reputation with the committee, and therefore you get refereed in that fashion. And I think Karl-Anthony Towns, when things happen, he flails his arms and he argues. Refs are tone deaf at this point because they know they've seen it. They're like, oh, he's probably arguing something that's not even close to being what he thinks it is. Why? Because he argues every single call. Sometimes he's not accountable to the turnovers that he has, and he wants to blame everything on a missed call. And then you see it on the MSG telecast. A lot of times they show the replay, and I'm like, "What are you arguing? That wasn't even
Right.
close. Like, how do
Right.
you have the audacity to go to the referee and argue this?" Luka Doncic has that issue in the NBA too. Like, how do
Yep.
you have the audacity to go to the referee and argue this, and you think the ref is going to give you the respect and the benefit of the doubt when you're basically trying to humiliate the ref and say that he missed it when literally his hit rate is probably 40%. He's probably 40 to 50% in terms of what he argues to what actually is. And I think he has destroyed his own reputation with the referees. And I think he is the reason why he doesn't get a call. One more other quick reason
Yeah,
why he
go,
doesn't
go
is
ahead, bro.
when he goes to the basket,
Hmm.
he always leans into the defender
Yep.
instead of bumping into the defender. And when he leans ahead of time. And that's why he's always off balance. That's why the
Always.
defender always has a chance to still contest the shot. Even though Karl-Anthony Towns is a 7-footer, drives 100 miles an hour versus 7-footers, you would think it's an advantage. But then when you see he doesn't create the separation that you would think he would, and a lot of it is his technique is off going to the basket. He's leaning ahead of time. It's like he's trying to get the foul before it even happens, and his body goes off balance in doing so. And then what happens is he doesn't have enough lift by the time he wants to shoot, and the defender's right there, easy contest.
Easy
And half of
contest.
the times it's blocked, other half he's falling on the ground. So I think his technique is off in his mechanics and his drives to the basket. And I think the other portion is his reputation with the referees is absolutely he doesn't have any.
I happen to agree with you 100%. Was talking about this. Shout out to my boy Anthony, who works as a personal trainer. And see, he said the same thing you said about him being off balance. And he said, look, he doesn't have a strong base. The base isn't strong for him. And this is why a lot of times he's off balance and he'll get those offensive fouls or make it easier, as you just said, for the defender to come and make a play. I agree with everything you said there. I agree. Couldn't agree more. I think you said it perfectly well. So you talked about this and Cat being the most important player, JD, most important player to support Brunson to get them to where they want to go,
Right.
which perfectly goes to where I wanted to go next, which is there a concern that this team, and I know there's been some talk about Jalen Brunson being a ball hog, which I think is a bit much when people say that, but is there a concern that the team might be too dependent on Jalen Brunson? I'll put it like that to save them late in games, and do you believe that this team has enough around Brunson to take the pressure off of him deep in the playoff run. Like that point you're talking about, can you get 4 out of 6 games, good games from Cat? Can you get 5 out of 7? Can you get 4 out of 6 from Mikal Bridges? Is there enough around Brunson to support him in a deep playoff run?
On paper, there is. I believe there is.
But
I
the
think there
games are
is
not
on
played on
paper.
paper, as you know.
Exactly. And,
Right.
and I think, but then that's why the head coach is brought here. The belief from the
Mm,
front office
mm,
is that Mike Brown system, they were interested in Jason Kidd, a potential Jason Kidd system or whatever. Like it's Mike Brown. That was the decision to, in terms of who they hired, right? So the belief is that Mike Brown can get enough consistency, maximize. We saw a lot about that, right? We heard a lot about that word, maximizing the personnel, maximizing the talent on this team. The ceiling is high, blah 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 blah, and again, I think we've seen it in stretches where you have enough offensively, where Jalen Brunson, you're gonna lean on him no matter what in the playoffs in the fourth quarter because just that's just the way the playoff format is. OKC's gonna rely on Shea in the fourth quarter, Jalen Brown for the Celtics. Like your best player is gonna have to come through within the last 4 or 5 minutes of playoff games. But before the previous 42, 44 minutes, I think the Knicks have enough. It's a consistency factor. And this is why this team is so maddening. It's so frustrating because, you see how dominant they can be when OG is scoring over 17, 18 points. But then you have OG scoring 9 points and you're wondering what happened. You have Mikal Bridges who is it can be a mid-range assassin when he's on, but sometimes he doesn't want to do that and he wants to just kind of like just lounge and he's not physical. He doesn't attack the rim. Like there's so many frustrations with this team because I think the personnel is all talented but inconsistent players at key positions. And so I think they have enough. I'm still gonna lean that it's gonna be matchup based. If they play the Pistons, they're gonna have to really bring their A game because the Pistons are gonna put ultimate ball pressure. I think if they play anybody else, I think they have enough to play those styles of basketball, whether it's 3-point shooting, whether it's fast pace, depending on who those matchups are. I think the Orlando Magics, though, they won't give them a chance, but those teams that are more physical, that are more into you, that are more, giving you ball pressure, they're the ones that are going to be the true OKC if they make it to the finals. These defensive, uh, you know, built teams are going to be the true challenges to the New York Knicks. And listen, at the end of the day, it is looking like Dexter, from everything we've talked about so far, is that it may look like we're going to have to lean on Brunson one more time. And when you talk about the offseason and you look ahead into a potential Giannis
Here we go. Here we
acquisition,
go. Yeah.
listen, there's no more trade deadline, Dexter. This is what
Right,
we
right,
have
right.
now.
That's
So
what you got.
those potential solutions are going to be in the offseason. It does look like for at least one more playoff run, it might be Brunson centric, at least for this playoffs, because when you have the inconsistency of this roster, what are the chances that in the playoffs they're all of a sudden, you mentioned you'll sign up for 4 games for Cat.
Oh
So what are the
yeah.
chances we're gonna get, consistency? We're probably gonna get more up and down Knicks. So again, it's gonna fall on Brunson being a superstar for every game of every playoff series for the Knicks to get to their ultimate goal.
That's a lot to ask of Jalen Brunson. As dope as he is, that is a lot to ask. We know that. Um, a couple more things for you before I let you get out of here. I appreciate the time. I I was talking about this yesterday, and I think you're starting to see this. You're seeing Mike Brown make some very, I would call it interesting late game substitutions. We saw this on Saturday night with the Rockets, where Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart, they didn't play most at the end of the game. We saw Landry Shamet. We saw Jose Alvarado. Mike Brown is like, size be damned. I'm going with the best defenders that are bringing that intensity. What do you make of the moves like these? And what do you think it says about the higher paid players who aren't playing in crunch time? Oh, and guys like Alvarado and Shamit who are playing in crunch time. What do you make of the moves by Mike Brown, and what do you think it says about those players?
First of all, I absolutely I love that he's doing that because and do it now, and get that information, get those lineup rotations, get those lineup, you know, those different lineups so that when the playoffs come and you have situational basketball, you have confidence and trust because a lot of the coaching moves that are done in the regular season, you also wonder are they going to be done in the playoffs because the players are a whole different animal, right? In
Mm-hmm.
terms of having that trust to actually pull the trigger on making bold moves of benching a Mikal Bridges for the last couple minutes, putting a Landry Shamet, a 1 year, $3 million player, in a big playoff game to end the game. Like it takes a lot of guts for a head coach to make these type of moves in the playoffs. So him doing it in the regular season, I like to see that. And at this point, Dexter, it might be the makeup of this team because like what is really the difference between some of these players, the way they're playing so far? Like the way that Mikal plays on some nights to how Landry Shamet, like what is the real gap there? Right? Other than Mikal is 6'6" and he is a higher paid player. He's a better player, of course. But the way that we're actually seeing them play in stretches, a lot of the production and the result are similar. So in this case, if that's the makeup of this team, I don't mind seeing it in the playoffs. I want to see it in the playoffs, right? Because I want it to be about what gives you the best chance to win. What it says about the higher paid players is, to me, it just says that this core is on his last legs. They
Mm-hmm.
on this is probably it, to be honest. This next 20 plus games and playoff run, this is probably it for this core. And I don't know that if they don't, I don't think you can. I don't think there's even more than a 10%. Like you cannot bring this core back because for 2 seasons, the thing they've done is, they've messed around with the bench. They haven't messed around with the core, right? The core has still been here between Cat and Hart and OG and Mikal and Brunson. That core has been, and McBride and Mitch. So those like 7 players pretty much have been your core for the last 2 runs. To me, it tells me that you've hired a coach. Where else are you going to go, Dexter? What's the next excuse? You need another coach. You need a different system. You need you need Phil Jackson to come back. Like what's the like? No, this is this is it for this core. And to me, it just says that they have and I hope that they realize and they're smart enough in the business world of basketball to know that I think they know that this is it for them. That if they don't maximize this run, they won't, a portion, at least half or a few of these players won't be back next year.
I think you're right, but I think it always goes back to the thing I always say on here. It's on the players. The players got to execute. It's on them to get it done, and whether they get it done or not, over like you said, the last quarter of the season, the playoffs, is going to be really telling. So that brings me to the last thing, JD, and then we're going to wrap. If the playoffs started today, they're not, but if the playoffs started today, how confident would you be on a scale of 1 to 10? I'm gonna let you do it that way on this team's ability to reach the NBA Finals. How confident are you in that?
All right, let me ask you a quick question. Is Tatum back on the Celtics? I just want to know. Because it might affect one level. Might affect one.
All right, you know what? For the sake of being fun, let's say yes, Tatum comes back. I'm not gonna say how he looks. I have no
Right,
idea,
right,
but yeah,
right.
let's say Tatum's
He
back.
like whether he's back for the last five
Yeah,
games or just he's just
yeah.
back. Okay. Um, right now they're the 3 seed today.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll stay within the 3 or 2 to end the season. So now I'm looking at their potential path. My From 1 to 10, I will say I am a strong. I'm at a strong, solid 8.
Strong, solid 8. Okay,
Yes, because in
okay.
the end, I think a lot of our conversation throughout this show has
Mm-hmm.
been about self-infliction. It's a lot of it is them. It's it's really if you really actually last year it was more about the Celtics, how overwhelming the talent of the Celtics seemed to be for the field of the Eastern Conference. Even with the Pistons doing what they did, I know they cooked us and all that. The talent is still not overwhelming. I'm not overwhelmed by Karis LeVert. I'm not overwhelmed by the inconsistent Tobias Harris. I don't know what Jenkins is going to do in the playoffs. I don't know what some of these, Javante Walker and these guys that, all of a sudden hit 40% from three when they see the Knicks. They don't hit those threes against anybody else. Like, I don't know what these guys are going to do in the big moment where, these guys are so used to, having 2-3 reporters in the playoffs. You have everything is packed. So like the moment, there's something to be said about the moment and how you perform under that pressure. And when I look at the Eastern Conference, I still don't see a team that I'm going to have nightmares about tonight and say, oh my God, how are we going to, there's not that factor. So I am going to still be confident in that this Knicks team, the same Knicks team that struggled to beat elite teams last year and were 1-3 against the Pistons, the same team that's having similar frustrations this year. They did it last year. They showed you. They got to the Eastern Conference Finals, at least. They can't do it this year? You're telling me they can't do it this year with a better roster, with a higher ceiling, with a more flexible coach that might pull more moves in the playoffs than Tom Thibodeau did? Like, he might play, different players in the playoffs that could win you a game where we didn't see that last year. Like, there's more variation to this team, and there's more potential. I'm going to stick to the script. I'm going to stick to the plan from the beginning, and I'm going to say that this team will be in the Eastern Conference Finals, and from there, they better, win 4 and get to the NBA Finals. So I am a solid, confident 8.
All right, solid, strong 8. You heard it there from JD. We will see, but luckily, we got time. The playoffs do not start today. That is my guy, JD from Knicks Fan TV, joining me here this week on New York Got Game. JD, it's been a while since we talked. I feel like this conversation was not as down as last year, the last time I had you on the show. Not as down, but I get why the vibes are still not great. Hey, the Knicks have still won 12 out of 15 games. There's still a little bit of season to play. We'll see how they do. JD, I appreciate you, bro, for coming through. Thank you so much.
All right, Dexter. Can't wait to see how this year turns out for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, we'll see how it turns out. All right, everybody, that is JD. Check him out with Knicks Fan TV. Go give him a follow as well. I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next time. Another edition of New York Got Game. Peace.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.